China versus India. The Battle of the Billions. China. Population, 1 for 18M. GDP, $18.9t. GDP per capita, $13,453. Growth, 5%. India. Population, 1 for 57M. GDP, $3.8t. GDP per capita, $2,592. Growth, 7.1%. India overtook China in population, but China's GDP is 5x larger. China is shrinking, lost 1.39M people in 2024. India adds 10M workers per year. Same planet, completely different futures. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Turkey versus Germany. Migration, money and power. Turkey. Population, 86M. GDP, $1.1t. GDP per capita, $13,243. Growth, 3.2%. Germany. Population, 84M. GDP, $4.5t. GDP per capita, $54,291. Growth, 0.1%. 3 million Turks live in Germany. Turkey's lira crashed 90% in 5 years. Interest rate hit 50% to fight inflation. Germany equals 16% of Eurozone GDP. Same population. For X the wealth gap. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Japan versus Nigeria. The old versus the young. Japan. Population, 123M. GDP, $4.2t. GDP per capita, $33,820. Growth, minus 0.2%. Nigeria. Population, 235M. GDP, $252 billion. GDP per capita, $1,084. Growth, 4.1%. Japan, median age 50. Nigeria, median age 19. Adult diapers outsell baby diapers in Japan. Nigeria earned $1t in oil, half still in poverty. By 2050, Nigeria 400M, Japan 100M. The future belongs to the young. Or does it? Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Bangladesh versus South Korea. Same start, different fate. Bangladesh. Population, 175M. GDP, $450 billion. GDP per capita, $2,619. Growth, 4.2%. South Korea. Population, 52M. GDP, $1.7t. GDP per capita, $34,165. Growth, 2.2%. In 1970, both had about $100 GDP per capita. Korea invested in tech. Bangladesh in textiles. The clothes you're wearing? Probably Bangladeshi. Korea built Samsung. Bangladesh built garment factories. Same starting line. 13x the income gap today. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Brazil versus Russia. Identical GDP. Opposite economies. Brazil. Population, 212M. GDP, $2.19t. GDP per capita, $10,282. Growth, 3.4%. Russia. Population, 144M. GDP, $2.19t. GDP per capita, $15,094. Growth, 4.9%. Exact same GDP, $2.19 trillion. Brazil feeds the world, #1 in soy, beef, sugar, coffee. Russia runs on oil and 16,000 sanctions. Russia spent $149 billion on military equals 7% of GDP. Same wealth. Completely different playbooks. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Indonesia versus Pakistan. 280M versus 274M. Worlds apart. Indonesia. Population, 285M. GDP, $1.4t. GDP per capita, $4,958. Growth, 5%. Pakistan. Population, 274M. GDP, $372 billion. GDP per capita, $1,578. Growth, 2.6%. Nearly identical population, both Muslim majority. Indonesia's GDP is 4x Pakistan's. Indonesia controls the world's nickel for EV batteries. Pakistan spends 2x on military versus health plus education. Same size. For X the economic divide. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Ethiopia versus Vietnam. Both rising. 30 years apart. Ethiopia. Population, 134M. GDP, $142 billion. GDP per capita, $1,311. Growth, 8.1%. Vietnam. Population, 111M. GDP, $459 billion. GDP per capita, $4,536. Growth, 7%. Ethiopia, fastest growth in Africa at 8.1%. Vietnam, poverty dropped from 80% to 3%. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee, only 23% urban. Vietnam, 33% of its exports are electronics. Vietnam is Ethiopia's future if it plays it right. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Mexico versus Philippines. Exporting people for profit. Mexico. Population, 131 m. GDP, $1.8 t. GDP per capita, $13,839. Growth, 1.4%. Philippines. Population, 118 m. GDP, $462 billion. GDP per capita, $4,089. Growth, 5.7%. Mexico, $65 billion in remittances, 2x its oil revenue. Philippines, 10 m citizens work abroad. Filipinos sent home $38 billion in 2024. Both economies run on human exports. Their greatest export? Their own people. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. DR Congo versus Singapore. Resources versus brains. DR Congo. Population, 116 m. GDP, $77 billion. GDP per capita, $744. Growth, 6.1%. Singapore. Population, 6 m. GDP, $515 billion. GDP per capita, $88,447. Growth, 4.4%. Congo, 116 million people, 70% of world's cobalt. Singapore, 6 million people, zero natural resources. Congo GDP per capita, $744. Singapore GDP per capita, $88,447. 119x richer. With nothing in the ground. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. USA versus next 14 combined. One country, $29 trillion. USA. Population, 346 m. GDP, $29.3 t. GDP per capita, $86,173. Growth, 2.8%. Next 14 combined. Population, 5,000 m plus. GDP, $37.9 t. GDP per capita, $7,500. Growth varies. For 0.2% of world population, 26% of world GDP. National debt, $37.8 trillion. Interest payments alone, $1t per year, more than the defense budget. Bottom 50% of Americans own less than 4% of wealth. The richest country in history, and the most indebted. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Saudi Arabia versus Norway. Two oil giants. Two strategies. Saudi Arabia. Population, 37 m. GDP, $1.1 t. GDP per capita, $30,436. Growth, 1.3%. Norway. Population, 5.5 m. GDP, $530 billion. GDP per capita, $94,660. Growth, 1.1%. Norway built a $1.7 trillion sovereign fund. Saudi built cities in the desert. NEOM, $500 billion. Norway, $300,000 saved per citizen. Saudi, diversifying at 90 miles per hour. Vision 2030. Same oil. Opposite philosophies. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. South Korea versus Argentina. 1960, both at $1,000. Then, South Korea. Population, 52 m. GDP, $1.7 t. GDP per capita, $34,165. Growth, 2.2%. Argentina. Population, 46 m. GDP, $621 billion. GDP per capita, $13,687. Growth, minus 1.6%. In 1960, both had about $1,000 GDP per capita. Korea, Samsung, Hyundai, K-pop, $34,000 per capita. Argentina, 6 defaults, 200% inflation. Korea invested in education. Argentina printed money. Same starting line. 2.5x the gap in one generation. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Countries drowning in debt. Debt to GDP ratios that shock. Number 1. Japan, 245%. Number 2. Greece, 177%. Number 3. Italy, 137%. Number 4. USA, 125%. Number 5. France, 112%. Number 6. Brazil, 87%. Number 7. China, 83%. Japan owes 245% of everything it produces in a year. U.S. interest payments exceed the entire defense budget. Greece nearly destroyed the euro in 2012. Global debt hit $315 trillion in 2024. The world borrowed its way to prosperity. Now what? Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Countries losing people. The demographic time bomb. Number 1. South Korea, 0.68 births. Number 2. China, 1.00 births. Number 3. Italy, 1.20 births. Number 4. Japan, 1.20 births. Number 5. Germany, 1.35 births. Number 6. Russia, 1.50 births. Number 7. USA, 1.62 births. South Korea, 0.68 births per woman, world's lowest. A country needs 2.1 just to maintain population. China could lose 200 million people by 2050. Japan, 1 in 10 people is over 80 years old. The biggest economic threat? Empty cradles. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more. Where are the billionaires? Wealth concentration by country. Number 1. USA, 813. Number 2. China, 473. Number 3. India, 271. Number 4. Germany, 132. Number 5. Russia, 110. Number 6. UK, 97. Number 7. Brazil, 74. USA, 813 billionaires, more than the next 3 combined. India, 271 billionaires plus 800 on food rations. Russia, 110 billionaires despite 16,000 sanctions. World's 26 richest equal the wealth of the poorest 50%. 2,781 people own more than 5 billion people. Subscribe to All About Economics with Michael for more.